Tensions with China continue as the United States ordered the consulate in Houston to close. This after the U.S. accused the Chinese government of spying and stealing intellectual property. At the same time, the United States reacted to a security law China imposed on Hong Kong, a Chinese territory since 1997, which is supposed to operate under a one country, two systems rule. I spoke with retired Lieutenant Colonel Gary LaForte, who is also Professor Emeritus of International Business at American International College, to learn more about the situation.
That act was implemented on June 30th of this year. And basically what it does is the Chinese government has basically said that is it a criminal event if you get involved in secession, subversion, terrorism, or collusion with foreign forces. I think the idea behind it is that Hong Kong has failed in the past to pass its own national security law, which it was authorized to do under the Joint Declaration back in 1984. And China is also looking at last year, 2019, where there was a serious number of protests that started out in, I think it was June of 2019, went all the way through September, and eventually started to involve in more pro-democracy reform demands on the Hong Kong government. And so I think China decided that it wanted to be more proactive and try to preclude those type of protest and give the Chinese government more centralized control in Hong Kong.
Can you talk a little bit about the history of Hong Kong? I know that it was under British rule for a long time. That changed in 1997, and you mentioned those pro-democracy movements. If you can explain a little bit about how the government works there.
Yeah, it really all goes back about 150 years. The first Opium War, where Britain was ceded the Hong Kong city. Later, at the end of the results of the second Opium War, China likewise had to secede Kowloon Peninsula as well. And then at the end of the 19th century, about 1898, China likewise leased the new territories to Britain for 99 years, which takes us to the 1997 timeframe. And where it was finally agreed that China would not continue to release the new territories, and Britain, not wanting to split Hong Kong, agreed to give back Hong Kong Island and Kowloon Peninsula as well, in exchange for what we now refer to as the one country, two system system in Hong Kong.
And can you explain a little bit about how that should work? I know that that's been a big concern with the pro-democracy groups that you had mentioned that were protesting.
Right. As far as basically as part of the joint declaration that was agreed to in 1984, besides this one country, two system principle, there was also a basic law constitution put in place. And under that, Hong Kong was supposed to be able to retain its capitalistic system that it had under the British, to include its borders, and likewise maintain the personal freedoms that they acquired under colonial rule, like freedom of speech, freedom of expression, the rights to gather, things of that nature. And that was supposed to last for 50 years to 2047. Here we are in 2019, 2020, and it looks like China is trying to renege on that promise that they made.
And the U.S. just recently passed the Hong Kong Accountability Act, I believe in reaction to the security law that was passed. What will that do? What kind of impact will that have?
Well, actually, there's a couple of actions that President Trump took on July 14th of this year. The first was the executive order, which basically removes some of the preferential treatment that Hong Kong had as far as passport processing, exemptions as far as exports go, joint training between the U.S. and the police. The other action that you mentioned is actually the U.S. Hong Kong Autonomy Act, that also went into effect on July 14th. And it really is designed to bring economic sanctions against Chinese officials and banks that had any involvement in the implementation of the national security law.
Okay, and so you're talking a little bit about, the increased tensions, and of course we've talked to you about this before between the U.S. and China. We just had this situation where the consulate was shut down in Houston. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened there?
Yeah, that is not really directly related to the Hong Kong crisis, but because of what's been happening there, and also because of past problems over China's involvement in the pandemic, the United States has really been starting to put a lot of pressure on China in many different ways, especially as far as intellectual property rights violations go and the collecting of economic data here in the United States. And the Chinese consulates have been under investigation for a while, especially the one in Houston, as far as economic spying goes, visa fraud in collecting of information on people here in the United States. And the United States decided that it was time to take action, and the embassy has to close its door and go back to China. Another incident has just recently involved as far as another consulate goes, and that's the one in San Francisco, where it's currently hiding a Chinese researcher who was filing for a visa and was not truthful about possible affiliations with Chinese military.
And federal prosecutors also charged two alleged Chinese hackers for their involvement in the coronavirus, research and treatment, looking at vaccines as well. So that was a separate incident that happened as well?
Yes, as a matter of fact, that happened a day before the U.S. announced that it was going to force the Houston consulate to close down. So that happened on July 21st. Of this year, and charges have in fact been brought against these individuals. The claim is that they have direct links to not only the Chinese government, but also military affiliations as well.
So as we move through, as we're still all dealing with the coronavirus, the economy being sort of slowly reopening, how does the U.S. continue, and what is it going to look like between the U.S. and China as we move out to September?
Well, it really doesn't look good. Last time we talked, it looked promising that even though the U.S. was concerned over the transparency in China as far as the pandemic went, indications, at least at the time, was that the United States was going to continue to follow through. So likewise with the Chinese as far as the first phase deal goes. I think that's really in question now as the situation with the Uyghurs in China, as far as human rights goes, that gets more and more international attention. The tension in the South China Sea is intensifying. We got the Huawei problem or concerns as far as the 5G network goes. There's a whole number of issues that is really bringing the relationship between the United States and China to a point where somebody's got to back down, either in the case of the United States, which I don't think is going to happen in the case of Trump, or in the case of China, which I'm not sure, because President Xi has really been very, very assertive as far as his position in office goes.